Hello everybody. So Thursday's lesson for class is going to be about simplifying expressions and combining like terms. Both important skills to have as we go into next week, needing to understand those skills so that we can start solving equations. So next week it'll be equation solving, all right? So simplifying expressions. First, we talked just a little bit about distributive property, and some of you have even jumped ahead a little because you did H1 and then it went to H2 and you started doing H2. So that's okay, it's not wasted because it is going to be something I'm going to assign that goes along with this lesson. So we'll get back to that. So to remove parentheses with distributive property, first you might say, why do I have to do this? Well, I can't do x minus 8 because I don't know what x is, right? But I can simplify this by taking the 3 times the x and the 3 times the negative 8, right? So 3 times x is just simply 3x. And 3 times negative 8 would be negative 24. And that's our answer. It is not an equation, so we cannot solve it. We don't say x equals some number. It's not that kind of problem, all right? It's just not. And so that's all we can do with it. We cannot solve expressions, right? We can't solve an expression. We can only simplify it because it didn't start out equal to something else. So same process, negative 4 times x, negative 4x, negative 4 times 7, negative 28. Not so bad, I hope. Sometimes there could be multiple things inside the parentheses. I can't add any of them together because they're not like terms. So I just take the 5 times each thing inside, every term inside. It's a new term if I hit a plus or minus sign. So 5 times 3x is 15x. 5 times negative 4y, negative 20y. 5 times 17 plus 85. And then you just walk away. That's it. Okay, so when the directions say simplify, we're not finding a value for x. Sometimes it feels like it's not done, but that's all we can do in a problem that's like this. Notice they don't start out with an equal sign. It's not something equals something else. It's just an expression, all right? So now negative 4 times 4y, negative 16y, and then be careful here, it's negative 4 times negative 8. So think of that subtraction sign being kind of stuck to that 8 so that it's negative 8. So that actually makes plus 32 because the two negatives make a positive. So those are some examples of how you're going to use distributive property. You heard me mention like terms before, that was why we could not put things together that were inside those parentheses because they weren't like terms. To be like terms, they have to have the same variables with the same exponents. So for instance, 3x and negative 17x are like terms. To combine them, you would just add the coefficients and keep the x. So 3x, negative 17x would be negative 14x. 34y and 10y squared are not like terms because one of them has an exponent on the y, but the other one doesn't have an exponent. So they are not like terms. So what you're going to see oftentimes might be something like this. 3x plus 5 times, and there's parentheses, 2x minus 7. So to simplify this, we've got to get rid of the parentheses first because remember that indicates multiplication and it would come first. So the 3x is just going to wait. 5 times 2x plus 10x. 5 times negative 7, negative 35. And then after we remove the parentheses, then combine your like terms. So then I get 13x minus 35. And that's where you stop. Again, don't try to do too much too soon. We're not solving equations just yet. This kind of problem is sometimes a little tricky. People try to do too much too soon. So all that. So people try to do that 5 plus 7, but you cannot do that 5 plus 7 first. All right? We cannot do the 5 plus 7 first because, because it's missing. We can't do the 5 plus 7 first because we need to do multiplication before addition and subtraction. So the 7 times the 2x minus 1, that's what has to come first. So the 5 plus is, he's just hanging out waiting his turn. So I get 14x minus 7. And then that negative 4, he's still out there waiting his turn too. So now I've gotten rid of the parentheses using distributive property. Now we're ready to combine like terms. So there's only one term that has an x. So it's still just 14x. It could be written first or second. And then we have a 5, negative 7, and negative 4. So I can think of that negative being attached to that 7 and attached to that 4. So 5 and negative 7 would be negative 2, and then negative 2 and negative 4 make negative 6. So 14 minus 6, or 14 negative 6. Keep in mind, you could see that answer written like this. Negative 6 plus 14x. Those two things mean the same thing. It would not mean the same thing if I switched the order but left a minus in the middle. So where you're going to practice this is, as I already mentioned, H2, that's distributive property. Some of you already started that lesson. H3, and then I3 and I4. I don't remember their titles. So those are going to be 4 IXL lessons. I'm going to switch over to preview some of those with you now. Okay guys, so this is H2. The beginning of this I hope you find pretty straightforward. Might get a little tougher, but don't be discouraged. Remember, you can always reach out and ask me for help. You can ask me through chat. If you come to Zoom, you can ask me through chat, or you can speak up and say, hey, this is my problem. I want to know if this answer is right before I type it in. I'm happy to do that for you, okay? So in this case, 2 times 2 is 4. And then 2 times c, so plus 2c. I do need the plus in between them. I'm going to jump a level so that we see how things look as they start to get harder. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 2 times 4g is 8g. You do have to pay attention to make sure that you use the right variable. So this one, now we're kind of going to work backwards. We're going to think, what number would go into this 9 and into 24? Well, 3 goes into both of those. So I'm going to write a 3 out here on the outside, and then you can just click that button and it'll make the parentheses. And then it would be 3u plus 8. So do you see how that's reverse of what we were just doing? So you want to think of a number that you could pull out, that you could divide both of them by, and then you want to make it so that if you did distributive property with your answer, it would get back to that original. Now we're back. It doesn't matter if the number by itself is at the front or the back. It's still the same thing. So 9 times, I always start kind of at the left more though, so 9 times 1, and 2r times 9. And it would be okay if you wrote 18r plus 9. That's still the same thing. So again, you want to think, what do they have in common? So in this case, they have a 5 in common. So now I'm dividing them both by 5. So 7W and a positive 2. And I forgot that I could just click the button. All right, so those are some examples from H2. And let's see. So then H3 we're talking now about simplifying. So some of these simplifying are pretty straightforward, like there's no distributive property to do. Basically just that we can put the 3 and a 4 together. So this is just Q plus 7. So this just means I'm going to do 3 times 6, and then it's still H. 4 times the 2, and then the B. 2 times 3 is 6, and it's still times F. 2 plus 2, oops. You have to use the shift to get the plus sign, so that can take a little. Now, this one was not distributing. That's why it's not 2V, because there's a plus sign between the 2 and the parentheses. It's not right up against it. And let's see if I can get you a couple other examples here. All right, so I'm back with I3. And so I3, I have a lot of H's here. So you're just combining all those by adding or subtracting the coefficients. Remember, you can rearrange things if you want. So personally, I would do this by putting all of my negative numbers together first. That would give me negative 16. And then a negative 16 and a positive 6 would leave me with negative 10. And then give it the H. So this one, the 8M is going to stay by itself. The 5 and the negative 7 would make negative 2. If there's just a Y, that counts as one Y. So I have 10 and 7 makes 17, and one more makes 18Y. And then this is back to distributing again. So 9 times 2C, and then 9 times 2. This is like my examples. So you might need some paper. So 3F plus 9, and then add the 3F to the 10F. So 13F plus 9. All right, well, I hope that that is helpful. Remember, on a problem like showing now, do your distributive property first. All right, do your distributive property first. I realize when I'm making these videos, I'm looking down because I'm looking at the screen instead of looking at you. Sorry. Don't mean to look shifty. All right, so been a good first week, a busy first week. Keep a lookout because I might change the assignment a little bit or lower the scores. I need to take a better look at these and see what parts are going to give people trouble or not. So I would always, like if you get stuck on one, like just try to get all of them to about 70, because sometimes I lower that score to about 75 anyway. All right, thanks guys.